Hello and welcome to Doing Business in Africa, an event brought to you by Business Live in partnership with the Department for International Trade. I'm Alistair Horton and I'm editor of Business Live, which is the business news site from Reach plc, the largest commercial national and regional news publisher in the UK. At Business Live, we work with Reach's partner titles across the North West, including the Liverpool Echo, the Manchester Evening News and Lancs Live. We're here today to help businesses learn more about doing business in Africa, a continent that includes 6 of the world's 10 top growing countries. We'll talk about what the opportunities are in a range of sectors, including infrastructure, power and energy. We'll discuss all the different routes to market. And of course, we'll talk about the impact of the pandemic and how that will affect companies looking to export to Africa in the future. We've got a great panel to discuss all this today and to discuss all the questions that you might have. But first of all, I'll hand over to Alistair Long. He's the Deputy Trade Commissioner for Africa, and he's going to tell us more about the opportunities for businesses. Alistair, welcome.
Alistair, thank you very much. So from one Alistair to another Alistair, it seems to be the name of the day. Thank you so much for the invitation to join you today at this important event and have the chance to talk to people across the northwest of England about doing business in Africa. My name's Alistair Long. I'm the UK Department for International Trade's Deputy Trade Commissioner for Africa. I'm sitting here in Cairo today, but I cover the whole continent, supporting our teams in every market to help British companies in Africa. I was, just before the pandemic, back in Manchester, talking to companies in your region about Africa, and it seems an age ago now. I wish I was with you physically today, although I know you're all managing the difficult lockdown restrictions. It would be lovely to be face to face, but at least we can connect this way. And I hope that we can provide some useful tips for everybody listening today. With that, shall I go into my presentation? So can everybody see my slides? There we go. So let's move on to the first slide, please. So I wanted first of all to say a little bit about the Department for International Trade and our footprint in Africa, where we are located. We're a network of 105 DIT staff, very few staff really for such a large continent of 54 nations, but 105 very talented and hardworking staff in 23 different markets of Africa. And those 23 markets represent some 88% of Africa's GDP. So we're in the places we feel we need to be to support business. And of those 105 staff, 78 of them are local staff. That means African staff employed there, not traveling out to the continent from the UK. Alistair said Africa has some of the fastest growing markets in the world, and that is certainly true. A slightly different stat, he gave you 6 of 10, I'll give you 8 of 15 of the fastest growing economies. That was the case before coronavirus, and it remains the case afterwards. And there was a very interesting IMF map produced recently of all the countries in the world and the rates of anticipated growth. And top of that list was Egypt, and just behind that were a good number of African countries. So we expect growth to stay really high in Africa and for it to support the recovery after coronavirus, about which I'll say something else later. It's a projected market of 2 billion people. So 1 in 4 global consumers by 2050 will be African. So it's a place you have to have a future strategy for, in my view. Total trade between Africa and the UK at the moment is 35.5 billion. In goods and services in the 4 quarters up to the end of quarter 1 2020. So we're already doing significant trade with Africa, as you might expect, given the strong historical relationship between the UK and the continent. But we aim to grow that. And we're looking for at least 5% growth year on year. That is our target as the Department for International Trade. And it's not just in the sale and export of goods and services. We also invest heavily into Africa, and we have a very proud 38.7 billion of investment stock, which makes us the 2nd highest investor in Africa in the G7 at the moment. Next slide, please. So last year in Africa, just to add a few details, We returned through DIT's work, so this isn't all the trade done with the UK and Africa, but through our own work, we returned 1.81 billion to the UK economy through the various deals that we supported. That put us very nicely positioned in the globe and what DIT does around the world. We had the best performing export campaigns, for example, in infrastructure, oil and gas, and agri-tech, the sale of agricultural technology. So that immediately shows you some of the sectors of opportunity on the continent. We weren't just about supporting deals for our companies and investors. We also managed to secure 4 really important trade continuity agreements covering 11 of Africa's nations and some of the bigger ones. We identified nearly 130 market access barriers, creating issues for our companies and investors going into Africa. And we managed to reach 214 million people with some of our media engagements. I shall come on and say a bit more about these different areas of work as we go through the presentation. Next slide, please. A really key event for us this year, I still think it's last year given what's happened in between, but early this year, a really key event for us. On the 20th of January, we held the UK Africa Investment Summit in London. That was hosted by the Prime Minister, and you can see him there showing all the energy of Africa, jumping in the foyer there with some of the hosts of the event. He thought it was a terrific event, and so did we all. We managed to get 1,700 people there, 16 heads of state, and it was a real moment in the sun for the UK's relationship with Africa. We were both celebrating what we've achieved already, that investment stock I mentioned, that trade that I mentioned, but we were also seeking to position the relationship for future. And we have committed to trying to be Africa's investment and trade partner of choice. Pounds worth of deals, both investment deals and export deals. At the summit, we launched a really important new UK Africa Investors Group of all our major investors in Africa who now provide us with advice on our strategy for supporting investment into Africa, and with whom we now work very, very closely. And we launched an online deal-making platform, which enables UK investors to look at African opportunities. So if there are investors among you, that may be of real interest. Encouraging UK investment into Africa is a really big part of our work. And in that, we're not just seeking to grow the levels of investment into Africa, we're also seeking to make those investments really high quality, that they bring sustainable benefits for Africa and for the UK. That means really high standards of environmental protection, job and wealth creation in Africa as well as in the UK, and really trying to grow a sustainable partnership that helps Africa on the path to growing its economies. In that, we have real pride in the investment that we already have in Africa. There are some terrific stories of what our investors already do, both to employ Africans, but also to develop their potential to contribute across their societies to the sorts of things that really matter for those economies. And that was particularly true during this coronavirus pandemic, where there are wonderful stories of what our big investors have done to support Africa, and completely free of charge, offering products, services, and support during this very difficult time. Next slide, please. And during the pandemic, we were really mobilized to respond to what was required, as has been the case across the world. So DIT has actually led the procurement exercise of getting key supplies across the world into the NHS. And we did some of that in Africa too. We very proudly managed to find surgical gowns for the UK, and in Egypt, we managed, if you look at the bottom of this slide, even to ensure a supply of toilet rolls to the UK, which at one point was blocked. And those toilet rolls were going to a toilet roll manufacturing facility in Blackburn, so not a part of this patch, I believe. We also managed to ease trade restrictions. One response of governments was to start trying to protect their domestic supplies by closing down their trade routes, and we help to keep that open and to support them. And we helped our companies as well. We launched a business response unit, which was aimed at trying to understand the problems they were suffering and trying to help them navigate the different forms of government and wider support. And then, of course, we really sought wherever we possibly could to help Africa. That was not just a governmental effort, that was an effort of the entire UK companies too. We've exported PCR tests. We've provided all sorts of surge equipment. So that's hospital beds, building infrastructure, medicines. We've exported ventilators and ventilator IP and technology. And as I say, we have that example of the toilet rolls too. But we really, through this, tried to be that partner that I mentioned earlier for Africa and help them with their needs. That continues, of course. While the trajectory of coronavirus in Africa at the moment on the health side is fairly optimistic. It's not hit the continent as badly as people feared it might. The economic impact is very severe. Next slide, please. So how do we work? I think this is really important for how we might then engage together. We have both a country and a sector focus. As I mentioned earlier, we're in 23 different markets. We tier those markets based on their economic size and economic prospects. And we have 7 major markets that we cover. Those are Egypt, Morocco, Ghana, Nigeria, South Africa, Ethiopia, and Kenya. And then slightly smaller markets beneath that, but that we still resource and still see real opportunity in. And the number of our staff in each market depends a little on that tiering and how big an opportunity we see. The country teams in those markets will be really, really important for you in working out the commercial landscape, finding relationships with key buyers, and helping keep your deals on track. But we also have a sector focus, which we overlay those markets. And we have sector directors. We're joined by one today, Raksha, on infrastructure. I'm delighted she's with us. We have sector directors in 6 priority areas: energy, infrastructure and mining, healthcare and life sciences, education and skills, agriculture, financial and professional services. And those sector directors lead virtual teams across the continent so that, as well as understanding the markets, we also understand the different sector opportunities and are pulling expertise from different places in the continent to support those. We have 2 cross-cutting sectors: technology. We see technological applications in all the priority sectors I've mentioned, and also some ICT and wider technological applications outside of them that we also wish to support. And technology is playing an enormously important part in Africa's development. It's already got really fantastic examples of using technology innovatively, like M-Pesa, the money exchanging platform that's used in Kenya and East Africa, which has hugely increased financial inclusion. But also tech's played a fantastic part in the pandemic in keeping Africa online. Really, really successful story there, in which Vodafone have played a very significant part. And then green economy, and this is a really, really important part of the UK's entire effort now as we prepare to host COP26 this time next year. And by green economy, we mean making interventions in every sector to try and reduce the carbon footprint, to try and bring green and sustainable solutions to the way we're engaging. And of course, the UK is rapidly growing its expertise in almost every sector on that. So we're keen to promote that expertise and sell that expertise overseas. And also a really key part of how we work is we do trade policy and trade promotion. So by trade promotion, we mean the deals, supporting investors and exporters, finding those opportunities in Africa and doing business. By trade policy, that is the commercial landscape. So making it easier to access markets, helping with the business environment and seeking to remove barriers to doing business, right through to negotiating free trade agreements to provide the underpinnings for an easy trading relationship. Next slide, please. So to go into a bit more detail on those, on trade promotions, the deals side, and this is what I lead for DIT Africa across the continent. I'll explain our approach here a bit. We're really concerned here in Africa with origination, by which I mean creating the opportunities, seeking them out, but also trying to enable them through a very close understanding of African buyer needs. So we spend most of our effort in the network here talking to different African buyers and trying to work out layer by layer what it is they really want and really need and where the drivers are. And also trying to ascertain where the money is that will make these things real. Our aim then is that we can bring to you back in the UK real opportunities, real understanding the market, and real introductions to real buyers. That really matters. Otherwise, you're going to be selling into a void. And some of the best ways we can do that, back to this word partnership, is by being a partner for sustainability. So really understanding from the buyers the trajectory of what they want to achieve, not just what they want today, but how that builds and how they're seeing the development of their sector or their market, so that we can be a partner with them in that. And sometimes we'll provide some technical expertise and capacity building to help them with that process of development, but that then may yield commercial deals. There are three main buyer groups, as there are in most parts of the world. There's both the public sector and the private sector, but then there's a third sector that's really, really important in Africa, which are the development finance institutions and development organization buyers. And separately, at some point, we can talk about how you engage with the UN and what contracts you might secure through the UN. And we've got an excellent colleague who supports that in Geneva. But there's also a huge body of work to be secured in Africa, working with development finance institutions and the programs that they have across the continent. On the trade promotion side, we try and stay as close as we can to business, not just African business, but UK business too. So some of our companies, if I think of the big ones, Diageo, Unilever, Prudential, they've got stacks of experience of how to do business in Africa, and we're very close to them and follow what they're doing, but also still help them a very considerable portion in a number of these markets. So we stay really close to the business, and they help us understand developments in the market and where new opportunities might arise. We provide a lot of market entry support, so we're really keen to bring new companies and investors to Africa, and we have a dedicated unit for that. That you can be introduced to through our international trade advisors, and they will help you understand the sorts of requirements. Alistair's talked about route to market, so the sorts of route to market requirements and how to get embedded in the market, where you might go first, whether you might need a physical presence, what the licensing requirements are, all these sorts of things, we can help with that. We of course use some of the traditional tools, trade missions, and our fundamental role here is to try and connect supply and demand. So as I said earlier, we're really keen to understand the needs, the demand, but then we want to connect as best we can UK solutions and products to that demand. Trade missions, we do think work extremely well, but only when they're very carefully prepared around a clear set of buyer requirements, and we bring the companies that are a match for those buyer requirements. Gone are the days, thankfully, where we put everybody on an embassy lawn pitching different products and just hope that you secure some contracts. We're much more methodical about it these days. And overall on trade promotion, with all these deals, we're not just seeking the occasional bump now. We want to try and open up new sectors and new areas of work so that we can have a sustained improvement in our trade data. So when we're getting into those priority sectors, we're trying to develop a partnership with the buyer that builds and builds and builds and brings in more and more UK supply so that we can really affect our trade data in a positive direction. Next slide, please. So worth a very quick word on UK export finance, which is such an important part of our trade promotion effort in Africa. We now have 3, soon to be 5 UK export finance offices in Africa, based in South Africa, Ghana, Morocco, Egypt, and Kenya. And their role is to really try and work with buyers to see what support they might need in terms of loan support to enable them to borrow and then to incorporate into their procurement some UK content. And UCAF has been terrifically successful for us, both in getting private sector buyers and public sector buyers to start using the UK supply chain, it is really worth your spending some time getting to know UKEF colleagues in the Northwest and talking to them about how they might help. But we are driving into loads of different procurements across Africa, 20% plus of UK content. And in that content, we're not talking about the big companies. We're talking about all the different companies across the UK that can be introduced into supply chains. This is also a really, really secure route to market, to be coming into an existing supply chain, into an existing project with a UKEF cover. It provides levels of assurance that are very, very helpful. Next slide, please. So I mentioned earlier, we don't just do the deals, the trade promotion, we do trade policy as well. And I think of trade policy as a spectrum right through from the very smallest hindrances that you might face coming into an African market through to huge business environment issues like corruption, like the bureaucracy that is sometimes faced. And we work at every level. So we work on the smallest issues, sometimes very significant, but small issues that businesses face, to try and alleviate those, to try and remove them, the barriers to trade. We work on macro environment business reform. We often do that with our colleagues from the Foreign and Development Office. And on that, we do have huge programs aimed at trying to improve efficiency in African nations and trying to improve standards and governance. And at the ceiling of this, we often find that there are things that we could address through agreements, bilateral agreements between the UK and Africa. And that's where we get into consideration of bilateral investment treaties, free trade agreements and the like. And a big part of our work at the moment is for the free trade agreements we've already been party to as the EU. We're working to ensure continuity of those over the end of this year and into next, when we will be a free trading nation. And at the moment, we've made very significant and good progress on that. We have a few more deals that we want to try and ensure continuity of before the end of the year. Once we've done that, we're not going to sit back and rest on those agreements, and nor do the African nations want to do that. We want to deepen them. We want to look again at them and see where we can take them further. And that needs to be a win-win. It needs to be thinking about African needs as well as UK needs, so that we move forward together. But it also allows us to incorporate further strengths of a changing UK economy. So we'll want in many of them to reflect services more than are currently reflected, and to provide further support to those industries. A big part of that is helping Africa to trade. Africa's had a great dependency over the years on aid, but the real story of Africa's future success is going to be in getting it to trade with the world. So access to the UK market's really important at this juncture, but also intra-regional trade. Africa doesn't trade very much with itself. And that's why we want to help with that. And we have some programs already aimed at helping intra-regional trade. But a very significant future development will be the elaboration of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, and the UK is providing a lot of support with that particular initiative. Next slide, please. So I'm always keen to take questions and answer those in however much detail is required. And today I can only really touch on these things. So I'm sorry I've given these various topics so far rather a cursory treatment. But here's how you can reach out to us. And please, can I encourage you to do so? Because I think Africa is a place full of opportunity. And I think that it's fundamentally easy to do business in Africa if the fundamental equation is right. So if there is a need and you have a solution or a product for that need, then it should be possible to do trade very easily. And there will be other issues, but they will be surmountable. But in tackling those other issues, it's really important to take some advice and to go into doing business with your eyes open. And we're here to help. So please reach out to us. And the way, first of all, to do that is to be in touch with your international trade advisors in the Northwest. They can then connect you through to us. If you prefer, you can be connected through to us directly, and we have a single point of contact to make life easier, which is up there on that slide, dit.africa@fcdo.gov.uk. That comes through to that support unit I mentioned earlier that looks at route to market, market entry. But the ITAs can also point you into that. We then have a senior team. There we are. There's our mug shots there. You can see me in the bottom right-hand corner. So Emma is our trade commissioner based in Joburg. Paul sits with her in Joburg and runs our network. Rebecca leads on trade policy across Africa, and I lead on trade promotion, supporting the companies doing the deals and trying to get investment into Africa. And then we're also extremely happy to connect you to our country and sector directors so that you can be in touch with the markets where you might want to do business. And you can talk to the sector directors about where the first market might be for your product and start to identify buyer needs against what you produce. So I shall stop there, but to say, I really do think what I said earlier, that companies should now have Africa very much on their radar as a place that is going to grow and grow fast, and a place where there's a huge affinity between the UK and Africa. They really want to see British companies here. They really value what British companies produce, the quality, the integrity of what we do. And there really is no reason not to try and seize these opportunities. And we're here to help you do that. So please reach out. And thanks very much. And back to you, Alistair.
And thank you very much indeed, Alistair. Alistair will be staying with us. He'll be joining our panel of experts to discuss the opportunities for trade with Africa. So let me introduce the other panellists. We have Raksha Maharaj, who is Africa Sector Director for Infrastructure and Mining for the UK Government in Africa. We have Claude Pretorius, who is Destination Marketing Manager at Trade and Investment KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa. We have Andy Eaton, who's Head of Sales for Africa at Hydropower Specialist Gilks. Thank you all for joining us. A reminder for those watching, you will be able to ask questions to our panel in a little while via the Q&A section of the webinar, or you can start asking questions already and we'll pick them up later on. But please do ask us questions. I'll start us off though, and I'll ask our panelist an introductory question, if I may. Andy, if it's all right, I'll start with you. Can you give us a bit of an overview of your business and the opportunities that you have found in Africa?
Hi, Alistair. Yes, thank you. I work for a company here in the UK, a family-owned company. We design, manufacture hydro equipment, so renewable source of energy. One of our key markets is Africa. We're a business that's been going over 150 years, so we have a very good reference list throughout Africa. We have key markets there at the moment that we're busy in, mainly I would say East Africa and Southern Africa. So within them regions, we're very busy in Kenya. We have a great history there for over 100 years. On the tea estates, for example, where we're providing power for the tea factories. We're small hydro, so it's mainly under 20 megawatts. So the power that we produce from our machines are giving power to rural communities. This is sustainable power. We have many machines that are still out there in the field that have been operating 80 to 100 years. Recently, I visited Unilever Tea Estate in Kenya, and they have got a machine on that site that's been running for 100 years. So whilst renewable energy is very key, small hydro is a bit of a kept secret, if that makes sense. It's all about wind and solar and the bigger projects, where the small hydro is very important for rural communities to get power to them, people that have never had power before. The key thing for us at the moment in the market in Africa is UKEF. We need support from UKEF. And unfortunately, we're not getting that at the moment, and we've been trying for many, many years. These projects, the value isn't as great as the larger projects for wind, etc., the value. So we're very keen to engage more with UKEF. We've got a great market out there in Africa. one of our
Andy Raksha, I'll come to you next, if I may. I mentioned infrastructure at the start, and your role, of course, is focused on infrastructure and mining. I wondered if you could tell us a bit about the opportunities that are available to British businesses in Africa in those fields.
Thanks, Alistair. So to pick up on something that we mentioned earlier, we spoke about some of the fastest growing economies in the world being in Africa. And these economies increasingly need to connect to each other as well as to the rest of the world. But there's a huge infrastructure deficit in Africa. The AFDB estimates this at about $170 billion a year. So while there's this deficit, it also means that there are opportunities in the sector in Africa. And I think, key opportunities for UK businesses and the areas that we've picked up, transport is probably the key one. So we see an increasing need for road, rail and air connectivity. I think rail especially is becoming really important in Africa. If you think about the vast distances and the need to get goods, including from mines, from one area to another. Something else that we've picked up is construction, so healthcare construction, hospitals, mobile clinics, affordable housing, the development of new kind of multimodal cities. And all of this makes sense when you think about increasing population in Africa, as well as increasing rates of urbanization. And the third area that we're looking at is water and sanitation. Now, this has always been an area of interest in Africa, but I think COVID-19 has brought into sharp focus the gaps that there are in Africa. Even in a developed country like South Africa, we've had problems with lack of access to water. So what we do expect is a number of projects coming out looking at improved sanitation, looking at things like water connectivity and provision, as well as leakage management. And all of these are areas where the UK is relatively strong. And then the final point to mention is that we see opportunities for UK companies across the project lifecycle, but I would say specifically at the front end of the project, and then further on looking at supply chain opportunities into these projects. Thanks, Alistair.
Thank you very much indeed, Raksha. Claude, I'll turn to you now, if I may. Claude will be sharing a video with us later on about what his province has to offer. But for now, Claude, just can you tell us a little bit about some of the work that you've been doing with UK businesses in KwaZulu-Natal? Claude, we need the volume, I think.
I suppose I should unmute as well. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, David. Alistair, I beg your pardon. Thank you, everybody. Yes, it's a great opportunity as trade and investment to be part of this. We have been very fortunate as an investment promotion agency in terms of our partnerships, especially with the DIT and, as was previously known, UKTI. And the province of KwaZulu-Natal, with several very well-known cities, a strong relationship with Liverpool through the city of Ladysmith, the Newcastle Twinning Agreement, and of course Durban, which is one of the oldest British settlements in Africa, and also a province that probably has some of the deepest entrenched investment from the UK. The UK continues to be one of our biggest investors. From trade, there's been quite a slag in terms of competition from the United States and China, but nonetheless still one of our biggest opportunities. There's been some very, very strong engagement, especially with the Northeast, with DIT and the partnerships there through the Northeast Chamber and through Business Durham, where we've seen on an ongoing basis trade missions in both directions. We've actually engaged now during COVID with an online mission from the UK to Durban, where we are seeing very strong engagement in several of the sectors, and especially those that Raksha has spoken about. Our video will covers quite a lot of the opportunity that the province presents. But I think it's important to note that Alistair mentioned, for instance, sourcing, and a key pillar of the development in our province and our region. And we've identified 6 pillars, but critical to those is how we source, making sure that the most the distant parts of the province are connected through their products and access to growth and through development. And product sourcing usually allows that, so that the benefit of growing the economy goes to all parts of the region. And we know that when all members of society start engaging in the economy grows faster. Another point that he mentioned was the environment, and environmental management is a critical part of what we do. We have a very active maritime environment. We're the wettest province in South Africa. We have a very strong agricultural sector. Our tourism around wildlife and wildlife management and conservation are all very strong. And these are all very, very critical areas. Raksha spoke of several opportunities that arose during the COVID period. And the healthcare sector obviously has come to the fore, underscoring again fantastic business opportunities, but also a lot of opportunities for companies that post-COVID are now looking for some sort of a diversification. Alistair mentioned the strength of opportunity in Africa, and the province of KwaZulu-Natal is very, very well connected. We've had British Airways flying since October, directly from Durban to Heathrow. There are other linkages through Johannesburg and Cape Town, but you now have a direct access and through two of Africa's biggest and busiest ports, Durban and Richards Bay. You've got connectivity into the whole of Southern Africa, the entire SADC region and beyond. So the opportunities are plentiful. As a province, we've been focused on ensuring that our companies stay open. COVID has been a very trying period for all of us, but through our various support mechanisms and systems, we've applied ourselves to ensuring that all of our foreign investors and our local businesses that are well invested and their staff remain operational. We do anticipate a bleak period coming up, but we see these sorts of international engagements and concerted efforts in terms of growing two-way trade, and also in terms of making sure that we grow existing businesses and increase investment, can ensure that we get through the next 18 months, during which I believe the world is going to still feel the pinch of COVID. As an old and long-standing partner of the UK, we also are an easy point of access post-Brexit in terms of international trade partners, in terms of diversification. We have one of the most diversified economies in Africa. Services is a major role player here, but all the sectors are very well represented. Mining is no longer a mainstay for us. We're looking at all sectors. So we do look to how we can engage further and work with UK companies that are looking to increase their global footprint, whether it's as a sourcing market for goods, but also in terms of leveraging that 2 billion population by 2050. And this is a fantastic time to enter the market to start engaging that. Already Africa is in excess of 1 billion people. The SADC region has more than 300,000 of them, and Durban and the province of KwaZulu-Natal provides a good landing point for potential partners who want to come into the region.
Super. Thank you very much indeed, Claude. I want to open up the panel to discussion now, if I may. Africa, of course, is a huge and diverse continent. We've talked a couple of times now about that figure that Africa will have 2 billion people by 2050. And I wanted to ask the panel really how companies should decide what areas or sectors to target. What should their first steps be, if you like, when they're thinking about doing business with Africa? Alistair in Cairo, I think. I'll start with you, if that's okay. What would you say the first steps are that people need to take when they're thinking about doing business with Africa?
Alistair, thank you. I think this is often the same wherever you are in the world, actually, which is it depends slightly how you've come to be thinking about Africa. If you have a contract in front of you, it's no bad thing to follow it, or a lead in front of you, it's no bad thing to follow it. You know, there's no wrong market to start with, if you like. You know, by all means, pursue whatever you've got, but at the same time, I think one of the reasons we exist, and I was trying to emphasize this, is that we should have a fairly developed sense of buyer needs across the whole continent. So that if you come to us and say, look, we make this, we're ready to export, we've had this kind of growth plan in mind, where do you think we should go with this? You should challenge us to come up with a good answer to that. And I think we can. I think we can come up with a good answer to that. But it will be really important that we can find you a proper match for what you do and don't just steer you down a cul-de-sac. And so sometimes we'll have that answer ready. Sometimes we'll have to go and inquire a bit and find out whether there's an actual gap in a market that would suit you. There then follows, I think, a really important part of this, which is about understanding what you're going to need to get into that market or to get that relationship with that buyer going. And that's onto route to market stuff, Alistair. But again, we can help with that. But as I said in my presentation, I think you have to get the fundamental equation right of selling a product to an actual need and not just pitching into a void. And if that's there, the rest should work fairly easily.
Thank you very much. Raksha, I'll turn to you if I may. Again, in the sectors in which you work, what are the first steps that people should take there if they're thinking about moving into the African markets?
Thanks, Alistair. So I think, you know, one of the main things that I pick up when people talk about Africa is perception. People tend to think of Africa as one country. And I think for me, a starting point is to understand that there are a number of different markets, Anglophone, Lusophone, Francophone. It's about understanding these different markets, understanding the dynamics, you know, what the buyers are looking for in each in each of these markets, and the types of goods that they are looking for. And this really will dedicate and will kind of, you know, help you understand where your projects should go, what they should do. In terms of infrastructure, I think, you know, traditionally we find that supply chain companies tend to follow the bigger companies, the contractors, the mining houses, etc., and slot into the supply chain opportunities there, whereas we have companies on the front end of projects, so in the services that look at projects that are under development. And just to echo what Alistair Long said, you know, this is really where DIT can assist you in terms of understanding what you want to do. And the first point is obviously to have a conversation with us, for us to understand your product and then match that with the need that we see emerging from different markets or from different projects in Africa.
Thank you very much. Andy, I'll turn to you again, if I may. Obviously, your company has very long-standing relationships in Africa, but of course you're also looking to win new business too. Are there any tips that you would give to any companies looking to follow your lead and take steps into various African markets?
Hi, yeah, thanks, Alistair. I totally agree with what's been said so far, but it's a case of, if you've got inquiries already, as Alistair said previously, low-hanging fruit, if you will, to go with them. Certainly for us, we're busy in East Africa and Southern Africa, and I think probably the main reasons for that is it's English-speaking, and a lot of it is based on British law, so that makes it easier. We are keen to get into North and West Africa, DRC, etc., Ethiopia, and places like that are busy. But they come with their challenges. Obviously, some of them countries are French speaking, so documents, tenders, etc., comes out in French, makes it more difficult for us. But in them markets, I think getting support from the British embassies in them regions is key. Their support is invaluable, and it's a first port of call, really.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. And it is important to stress, of course, isn't it, as we keep saying, that we talk about Africa as one place, but it is, of course, a vastly diverse continent, as we've talked about already today. We're in extraordinary times at the moment with the pandemic, and as I mentioned at the start, it does seem appropriate to talk about that and how that's affecting things right now. Claude, I'll come to you first, if I may, because you have mentioned this already. Claude, how has the pandemic sort of been affecting things where you are, and what do you think the prospects are in the near future?
I think that South Africa has felt, the South African economy has felt the effects of COVID quite drastically, but I think we can applaud our state president and his team in terms of the rapid response and the compliance or the willingness of the South African people to follow the rules. And I think that's always the biggest issue, as we see in some parts of the world, where
I think Claude might have paused on us. We'll return to Claude in a moment, I think, if that's okay with everyone. Raksha, I was going to come to you next, actually, and ask in the sectors with which you deal, how has the pandemic been affecting things already, and how do you think it will affect things going forward?
Thanks, Alistair. So I think, in terms of infrastructure, what we did find was that in the midst of this pandemic, we healthcare construction and the need for kind of emergency units, mobile units, etc. There was a lot of demand for UK services, such as the facility that was developed at Excel. How do you set these up? Consultancy services for government, etc. So in the midst of the pandemic, we did pick up opportunities in the healthcare sector. We also picked up opportunities in the water sector and ensuring supply, particularly out to rural areas, things like that. So there was a lot of demand for kind of emergency response services in a number of different infrastructure subsectors. That being said, looking beyond the pandemic, we've seen to be honest, there hasn't really been a decline of activity in the infrastructure sector. And I think the reason for this is that traditionally infrastructure projects are long-term. So when we start talking about a project, it's usually a few years before it's delivered. So we've continued to have these conversations. What's been encouraging to me is that African countries are thinking long-term. They're thinking beyond the pandemic. How do they develop? How do they create their infrastructure and look to build their economy going forward? And an example I'll give you is in South Africa, where the South African government has built their economic recovery program around infrastructure development, looking at how infrastructure will kickstart the economy post-COVID. And we expect this in many more markets. And, our work is how do we position ourselves and position UK companies to take advantage of these opportunities.
Raksha, thank you very much indeed. Andy, I'll turn to you before coming back to Alistair. But Andy, first of all, how's the pandemic affected the way you've done business then?
Unfortunately, we're okay. Bizarrely enough, Africa, throughout the pandemic, we keep continuing to get very good inquiries. We've just done a big pre-qual for 9 projects in Uganda, but also current projects are moving along quite well. Similar to what was mentioned before, our projects could last for maybe 12 months. So from getting the initial inquiry to shipping our equipment that we've designed, etc., manufactured, that could be 9 or 10 months. So at the moment, we're working on a project in Malawi, which is quite a good size for us. One of our first projects in Malawi for many years. And we've shipped that out, and we're waiting to find out if our engineers can go to site to do the install and commissioning. So we're fortunate at the moment. I think the delay would be where developers are waiting for certain pieces of paper to be signed, licenses, environmental, government things really, that need signing off. That's where the delays will be happening. But fortunately, we're doing okay. We're riding the storm very well.
I'm pleased to hear that. It's such a challenging time, and it's good to hear some success stories. Alistair, to return to you, if I may, then with sort of an overview, how have you touched on it earlier on, but how has the pandemic affected what you've been doing, and also trying to be positive and look ahead? What do you think comes next?
Yeah, so look, I agree with what everyone said. I want to be careful here not to sound too positive this pandemic and the economic downturn that it's created. And across Africa, there will be many informal jobs that have been affected by this, and there are some industries that have been really impacted. And for example, those industries include industries very reliant on logistics, so where fresh goods or produce are being moved, and those routes that they've relied on, particularly air transport, have been reduced. That's had a serious impact. But I think it's also shown a number of aspects of resilience about Africa, which are worth just highlighting. So the first, perhaps, that these economies are in many ways quite self-sufficient. So they are exposed to global forces more so than they've ever been in the past, but they still have quite significant agricultural production in almost every state, which supports the basic sort of requirement of food and so on. They're also quite used to working in very difficult financial contexts. You know, a good number are already indebted, and they're now even more severely indebted. But they have strategies for coping with that to some extent, and there is further support available to them for that. And then I think that there's also, as Raksha says, you know, there have been plans that have been developed anyway to work with a shortage of finance and a shortage of capacity. And so those plans still survive intact. I think what we are seeing is some rescheduling, of course, of those. So there will be some delay. I think we have to be open to the fact as well that we're still in this and we haven't seen the full consequences play out yet. But there have been some really sort of positive things as well. I mean, Africa is adept at improvising and innovating. I mentioned technology earlier and how that actually gets round very formal structures that we have in Europe and so on, of banks and these sorts of things. I mean, they're using technology to make it accessible to people in ways that we don't even use in our own country yet. And technology has really come to the fore in this pandemic in Africa and supported what's been needed. And so I'm sort of I am fairly optimistic, actually. I see them recovering perhaps faster than shown that they're growing in stature like technology, but they've really pushed forward. You know, new products have come out at speed to enable remote diagnosis or medical packages to be delivered or social support to be enabled. You know, we've also seen through the pandemic the advantage of this, of being virtual, of being able to reach people. So we now have probably had it because of that, but also because actually there's been a really genuine dialogue created about what Africa needs and how we can support. We've had probably better access in the last 6 months than we've had for a long time to decision makers based on the right solutions. They no longer want to just sort of look at the cost of things. They want to look at actually how to grow. And healthcare is a really good example of that, where we've got back into discussions of healthcare system reform with a number of African countries who want to look at the UK's NHS and how we do things and learn from that, and even sort of the procurement systems we use and those sorts of things. So there are a number of new opportunities that have arisen from this, but I think it's right that we all go into this with our eyes open to the fact that when a global pandemic hits, Africa is going to be uniquely affected because of its impoverished status.
Thanks very much indeed. Before I hand over to Claude, who's going to give a pretty place to do business for British firms, but as we talked about today, there are a lot of opportunities there as well. And just Andy, just to you quickly then, what's a message that you would give to companies who are thinking from the UK, who are thinking about trading with Africa? What's a message you'd give to encourage them to make a start?
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly don't be frightened. That perception is wrong. It's a great place to work. It's very rewarding. We enjoy working there, right from receiving the inquiries through to the guys going to site and doing the install and commissioning. Support is vital. Again, I think if you get support from the British embassies, the consulates, etc., in the regions that you're looking at doing business, certainly tap into that and their experience. Local partners, agents could be key, but you've got to be very careful who you pick, because they are your eyes and ears, if you will, in that region. So be very careful who you choose as agents. But yeah, certainly go for it. Absolutely.
Thanks, and I know we'll return to one of those subjects actually in our Q&A a little bit later on. Some questions have started coming in for us. Raksha, just finally to you there on exactly the same point, if I may. What would you say to encourage firms who are thinking about Africa to take that step?
Thanks, Alistair. So I think, a good starting point is to be talking to ITAs in the UK, to be reaching out to us in Africa. We have a number of events like the one we're doing today that provides more information on different sectors, different markets, etc. I think, it really starts with a conversation, and that's what all of us at DIT Africa are really prepared to do, to talk to you from a sector perspective, from a market perspective, and then drill down into your product and look at what opportunities there might be and how we can help you with that.
Raksha, thank you very much indeed. Now, before I take questions from our delegates who are watching today, and a reminder that you can give us questions via the Q&A section of the webinar, I'm going to hand over to Claude. Claude is going to give us a presentation on rethinking business opportunities in South Africa, and I think he's also going to show us a short film as well. Claude.
Hi, thank you. Apologies about that loss of connection earlier. I think I'm going to go straight to the video, and then I'll just say a few words after that. Thank you.
KwaZulu-Natal is an enticing, sophisticated, and spectacular destination. As one of South Africa's 9 provinces, it is the country's second largest economy. The ambitious future growth of the province lies primarily in its positioning as the gateway to Africa. Nowhere else in the continent is the combination of sea, land, and air logistics being more developed and optimized as it is in KwaZulu-Natal. The province boasts 2 of the largest seaports in sub-Saharan Africa: Durban Container Terminal, which has recently been widened and deepened, and Richards Bay Harbour, the country's busiest deep-water and break bulk port, and home to the privately operated Richards Bay Coal Terminal. Both ports are backed by a world-class rail and road infrastructure, giving KwaZulu-Natal a key competitive advantage. The N2 is an important corridor connecting Durban and Richards Bay, and the N3 links Durban with a double-lane artery to the bustling capital of Gauteng. When it comes to fast, agile access to global markets, King Shaka International Airport is Southern Africa's premier air logistics platform. Situated at the Dubai Trade Port, this area truly prioritizes integrated air services. The province has the second highest export propensity, as well as the second highest level of industrialization in the country. Toyota South Africa, the country's largest vehicle manufacturer, is located in the province, as are several major national suppliers. The ship repair, shipbuilding, and boat building industries also have a long and proud history in Durban. The province's chemical and plastic subsector is well established, versatile, and diversified. Minerals and mining are key industries in the northern areas. KwaZulu-Natal's agricultural sector boasts a wide diversity of high-quality agricultural land, and it is the country's leading producer of timber and manufacturer of timber products. KwaZulu-Natal is also striving to be a strong ICT and electronics contributor. To ensure growth and development of its wide variety of sectors, special economic zones have been identified as a conduit for economic growth. With its subtropical climate and breathtaking settings, KwaZulu-Natal is South Africa's domestic tourism leader. From its metropolitan heart in Durban, you will never be more than 3 hours away from the pristine beaches of the south, the majestic Drakensberg to the west, or the Isimangaliso Wetland Park in the north. As a place to live and work, KwaZulu-Natal offers world-class infrastructure and excellent medical, educational, social and cultural facilities. A skilled and semi-skilled labor pool also ensures that current and budding enterprises will have the right people readily available. With so many opportunities at hand, there's never been a better time to unlock the potential of KwaZulu-Natal. Trade and Investment KwaZulu-Natal, your knowledge partner in business.
Thank you, Alistair. I'll forgo the presentation. Just to add on to the video and say that South Africa is an English-speaking country. Though we have 9 languages, English is the first language. It's the language of business. Our financial services and our legal services are well-renowned and sturdy and commensurate with those in the UK. As Raksha stated earlier, one of the critical aspects is partnerships. If any of the participants want to do business, reach out to us. As an investment promotion and trade agency, we provide free services to all takers. So you've got very strong automotive clusters, chemicals and plastics. You have agricultural clusters. You've got all the sectors very well managed. So in terms of how do you start or where do you begin, it's understanding what your product is and wanting to pursue the opportunity. Our economy is extremely diversified. The sub-Saharan economies are very well interconnected, and there's a great opportunity to leverage the base destination, not only great for doing business, as you saw from the video. The province of KwaZulu-Natal is on the subtropical east coast, so we don't have a winter. So you can visit us during your winter, during your summer, and you can also do business in that environment. So thank you very much for the platform, and I look forward to questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Claude is, of course, going to stay with us on our virtual panel, and I'm going to put some questions to that panel now. A reminder to anyone watching that there's a Q&A section of the webinar, so if you want to put some questions to our panelists, then please do so. But I've got one to start us all off with, which is one about cultural barriers and managing those cultural barriers, and how important it is to have people in Africa to help with those business introductions that are often needed to do business face to face, or can that be done from a UK base, or do you need that person on the ground? Who shall I start with? Shall I start with you? Andy, I'll start with you as a business that's working there at the moment. What do you think about that question?
I think there's a mixture really. I used to travel to Africa a lot. For probably a week, 2 weeks at a time, meeting various customers, and our customers are different. As probably mentioned earlier in one of the presentations, we deal with private, public sectors, etc. But I personally think you can't meet business face to face. You need to meet someone face to face, and you can both, on both sides, judge who you're dealing with. I think that's very important. As having a partner in them countries, yeah, I absolutely agree with that as well. But I think it's very important who that partner is. You've got to do your work, and again, like I say, first port of call for me would be get that support from the British Embassy, etc., and tap into their local knowledge. I think it's the local knowledge that's key. Absolutely.
Thanks very much, Alistair. I'll turn to you if I may on the same question. And obviously, of course, it's a challenging time at the moment to travel or even think about meeting people face to face. But nonetheless, as a general principle, what's the advice you give to people on having people on the ground and doing business face to face versus virtually?
Yeah, look, I think it's really important actually that there is at some point a face-to-face meeting. Business is done on trust. With technology, we can do a lot of the first steps without the need to jump on a plane, without the need to make repeat visits, which was expensive for our companies, you know. And so we can try and help reduce the costs of the initial stages of transaction where the buyer gets to know your product rather than you. And works out whether that is something they're truly interested in. And then at the point at which there really is a strong interest, then face-to-face, I think, really matters. There's just one other point I'd add here, which is while I do think technology is really helpful, I think, you know, virtual introductions are useful. WhatsApp is also powerful now, you know, the ability to stay in touch in real time like that. There are a few things to remember, which is most of the world does not do business on email like we do. It's not that you can't do that. It's not that emails don't make sense at some points in time, but there's not the same sort of reliance on email culture as we have in the UK. So be very careful about that. Much better to try and maintain a human contact in some shape or form, whether that's video call, phone call, or at the right point, a physical visit. And then, you know, just on the physical visit and getting that right, you know, we will try and do as much to prep that as we can. I really wouldn't jump on a plane too soon, but at the right moment, I'd say it's essential, especially if it's new business. If it's repeat business, less so, you know, and then you can start to work on WhatsApp and things.
Thanks very much. Another question that we've had in is about languages, because it's been mentioned already that there are a huge number of languages in Africa, and of course Claude mentioned specifically in South Africa as well. And I wondered how important it was, we've been asked in our Q&A, how important is it to make your business available in all languages? Should your website, for example, be in other languages? Raksha, I'll come to you on that one. How important is that, would you say, to the people that you're dealing with?
Thanks, Alistair. I think, definitely in some markets, you want to have that connection with the local languages. When we work in the infrastructure sector, for example, and you have things like requests for proposals, in some Francophone markets, you'll need to submit these in French. It really depends on the market that you're looking at and how you want to reach your audience. We have a number of markets in Africa that are Arabic speaking. And for your buyers to properly understand your product and your ambitions in their market, you want to be able to communicate with them in their own language. So I would say, it comes down to understanding the market and then kind of targeting for your product, how you want to target the buyers in that market and what you want to do.
Thank you. Claude, because you mentioned languages when we spoke just now. Obviously, as you say, English is sort of the main business language of South Africa, but how important is having these other languages and the accessibility there?
I think it goes to what Raksha has just said, and that's in understanding who your client and your target audience is. If you're going to be, for instance, we have a company from the UK that's looking at language training from preschool through to the finish of secondary. And one of their innovations was understanding that for them to have greater appeal, that they need to also include more than English and Afrikaans, which is the derivative of Dutch, but also to have the indigenous African languages. It just gives them greater reach and greater applications in terms of the various audiences. When you look at South Africa's population, where only about 15% of the population are English first language speakers, while the business environment is primarily English, depending on your product. Products don't have to be labeled usually in languages other than English in South Africa, and that's not a requirement. But understand your market, understand your product, and know what you are trying to achieve in the market, and then language becomes quite critical. I also just wanted to say, in terms of the face-to-face point, I think one of the critical lessons for us with the influx of COVID is that there have been some positives and negatives. And the positive, of course, being that we see now that you can do a lot of the preliminary engagement and literally set up your access to markets online. We are seeing that face-to-face component in terms of closing the deal still remains a crucial point. But most important is for companies to understand that they should not forego the vetting process. We're finding a lot of online transactions taking place where companies are not taking advantage of the likes of the UK Commercial Service, DIT, or Trade and Investment, or even the local chambers, or alternately even, for instance, the South African High Commission in London, in terms of making sure that they get more information on who they're doing business with. So we find that in mid-transaction, or after perhaps the deposits have been paid, they suddenly realize that they're uncertain about whether they want to proceed. So it's very important in this age of online transactions that they follow through the necessary protocols in terms of vetting who they're doing business with, the validity of that business, does the business exist, and can they deliver on the promises of the agreement? Thank you.
Thanks, Claude. We've had a question for Andy, actually. Just asking, can you talk us about any sort of particular challenges that you've had in the business that you've done in Africa, and, of course, how you've overcome them?
Challenges are quite varied, I suppose. One of the issues that we have at the moment is we're getting more and more inquiries, good inquiries, but they want finance. It's key to our business now. It's changed, it's evolved from what we were doing, 50 years ago. It's totally changed. We need that financial support. Hopefully we can get that with UKEF. We are getting requests from developers saying that the UKEF tool is of interest, if that makes sense, and the finance. I think that's probably the main thing for us at the moment.
We have with us today Tirsa Adamu from the Department for International Trade, who's going to tell us more to conclude today about how the DIT can help businesses with their exporting activity. Over to you.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, fantastic. I've just been sitting here quite quietly, so I think a lot of the delegates have been wondering why I'm here, but yeah, I'm good. I think firstly, I'd like to thank all the speakers for such a fantastic kind of event and presentations. Extremely informative and insightful, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I hope everyone else has. I'm sure they have, because we've got a very top level and range of speakers from different sectors and different disciplines and different areas of business, public sector and private sector. I think my presentation is up. Yeah, so my name is Tirsa Adamu, and as Alistair has said, I'm an international trade advisor and the Africa lead for the DIT Northwest team. So I think today I just want to kind of cover the IT support that is available for companies who are interested in exporting, whether that's Africa or within other markets. Next slide, please. I'm going to touch upon basically what I do or what I have been doing within the IT Northwest team. So obviously we have a range of events which Raksha and Alice has mentioned. One of the key things which we do is events which are either market or sector specific. And within the Northwest team, we've put together a Africa business group, which has been set up to provide information support and also identify trade opportunities in Africa for companies working with the IT in the Northwest. And as a group, what we do is we meet monthly to host, well, bi-monthly, sorry, we host sessions similar to this, but on a smaller scale to identify trade opportunities in what we would see as the highest potential and fastest growing African countries. We've actually had Alistair who presented and opened our first event. And hopefully we can have some of the other speakers from today presenting us some of our future events. The next Africa Business Group meeting is on the 26th of November. And I think you can see the link here if you're interested in joining to kind of take part and listen to what's going on, some insight, meet some speakers, you know, people who have got experience of doing business in Africa, similar to Andy, from different sectors as well. Next slide, please. So yeah, I think speakers, especially Raksha and Alistair, have kind of covered a lot of this, and Andy and Claude. So if you're a company that is interested in exploring new markets or increasing your export sales and opportunities, you can also visit our website, which is www.great.gov.uk, and you'll be referred to one of our international trade advisors, such as myself, who has a kind of specific knowledge, whether it's on a specific sector or market, or I think most of us also have a general idea of what's going on globally, but for me as well as working specifically on Africa, I do help companies within other areas, with other markets, other sectors. So what we tend to do is support companies with developing a export strategy and planning towards your short, mid, and long-term export strategy. And it's also key for us to work you and increase your market knowledge whilst also trying to help you at the same time identify potential business partners in those markets. And also one of the key things which we have done in the past, obviously with COVID, it's restricted, and a lot of what we do is online, is give you access to our trade missions and overseas trade shows, which are obviously with the current climate, a lot of that is online, but yeah, still going ahead. There's still a lot of activity. So if you visit the website, you'll see what's going on and how you can access it. And a point that we touched upon a few times today was in terms of awareness of language and culture within specific countries and regions, which is also key. And as Alice has mentioned earlier on, DIT Africa has a presence in most of the, well, all of the major economies within Africa. I think 23 of the African markets, 23 out of 24, with 105 staff within those markets. We also help or guide you through areas such as product and service development, so including innovation, IP and standard operation, legal and regulatory issues, export controls, and also touching upon something that Andy has mentioned a few times, which is financing and paid, and also those finance mechanisms which are provided through UKEF, which is the UK Export Finance. So I think just for me to close, I think I want to just reiterate some of the key points that were discussed today. You know, Africa is a continent of 54 countries, home to 1.3 billion people. It's extremely rich in diversity. As Alistair mentioned before, it's home to 8 of the world's 15 fastest growing economies, rapid urbanization, mega cities. It's an extremely resilient continent, and also one of the world's fastest growing middle class populations in the world, a youthful population, and a long established history of doing business with the UK. You know, Africa is definitely open for business. It's full of opportunities, and EIT is here to support you.
Thank you very much indeed, Tirsa, and thank you for leaving us with that optimistic message. Africa is open for business. That's all for us from today. Thank you very much indeed to all of you joining us. Thanks to all of our panellists and speakers. Thanks to MSP Global for hosting us today in our virtual socially distant studio today. Thanks also to Katie and Reach Events for organising. And of course, thank you to the Department for International Trade for all your help. Now remember, we have 2 more events coming up with Business Live and the Department for International Trade. We have one called Doing Business in the Middle East, which is on the 24th of November. And we have one called Doing Business in the USA on December the 3rd. The links for those events will be shared at the end of this one. But that's all for today. Once again, thank you very much indeed for joining us.